If you're gonna do it, finish the job. If by a chance, even a single scholar is hiding out in that ship, all this sacrifice will have been for naught. You must destroy evil at its very roots. This single panel encapsulates Akainu's character to his core. An evacuation ship of non-scholars were on their way out of Ohara. They didn't commit any crimes, nor did they pose a danger to the world government. Akainu did not care. I felt the need to start this video off with this specific moment, because this gives us the foundation to his entire character. Every other major villain in One Piece has a crack in them. Doflamingo has a childhood that split him open, nobility stripped from him, mother dying in the mud, the world he was promised ripped away before he was 10 years old. Crocodile has a failed dream, a man who once believed in something real, before cynicism calcified everything. Blackbeard waited 26 years in the shadow of the Whitebeard pirates, cultivating something dark and patient and furious, and the story lets you feel the weight of that weight. Even the Gorosei, even Imu, operate on a logic of fear, of something precious they cannot afford to lose. Every great antagonist in this series carries a wound the audience can locate, can understand, can almost feel sorry for. Akainu has a principle, and somehow that is worse. Sakazuki, known by his admiral alias Akainu, is the current fleet admiral of the Marines. He possesses the Magu Magu no Mi, a Logia-type devil fruit that allows him to create, control, and transform into magma at will. He ordered the destruction of civilian evacuation ships at Ohara because the math said one escaped scholar was too great a risk. He killed Ace because Ace was Roger's son and Roger's bloodline was a threat to world order. He chased Luffy across Marineford after the war was already won, because leaving a pirate alive contradicts the principle. He definitely comes off as cruel and pure evil, but what if I told you he was none of those things? Akainu is logical, and that is what makes him frightening. Akainu remains to be one of the characters we have yet to see more of, but with the context we currently have, it's more than fair enough to assume and dissect him for what he is, and what he represents in this story. Everyone calls it absolute justice, and everyone talks about it like it's simply a synonym for extremism. Like it's just the name Oda gave to the flavor of villain who does bad things in the name of good intentions. And that reading isn't wrong exactly, but it misses the thing that makes Akainu interesting. It misses the internal logic. Absolute justice, as a marine doctrine, is a strict philosophy that holds that all evil must be eradicated from the world, that followers are prepared to go to any lengths to ensure justice is served and do not hesitate to eliminate anyone who obstructs them. That's the public-facing description. What that description doesn't capture is the philosophical engine underneath it. Here's how Akainu's version of absolute justice actually works. Evil spreads. It spreads through action, yes, but also through knowledge, through bloodline, through the mere possibility of threat. One escaped Ohara scholar carrying knowledge of the Void Century could destabilize the entire world order that the Marines are tasked with protecting. One Roger bloodline heir, kept alive, becomes a rallying symbol, a living proof that the Pirate King's will can continue. One boy with dragon's blood in his veins is, on a long enough timeline, a revolutionary waiting to happen. The math of absolute justice is cold and brutal, and on its own terms, utterly consistent. The problem is not that the logic lacks coherence. The problem is that Akainu is applying coherent logic to a fundamentally corrupt institution. He upholds the law to the letter, and the law protects celestial dragon slaveholders. It erases inconvenient history, such as the Void Century and Ohara's research. It assigns criminality based on birth, on association, on bloodline. He is not upholding justice. He is upholding the appearance of justice in service of power that has no interest in justice at all. His absolute justice and the world government's actual agenda are not the same thing. And somewhere underneath that unflinching certainty, Akainu knows this. I only say this because we have seen this. He has clashed with the Five Elders. He called CP0 the Celestial Dragon's puppets to their faces, and was furious when the false report about Doflamingo's resignation damaged the Marines' credibility. He does not like the Five Elders. He does not trust them. He sees the Marines and justice as extensions of himself. When that identity is threatened, he seethes. Now compare him to Kuzan, who chose his own label, Lazy Justice. Here is the comparison that matters. Kuzan chose Lazy Justice after Ohara. He chose it as a disguise for a moral compass that had become too dangerous to show openly inside an institution he no longer fully trusted. He labeled himself lazy, so that no one would expect too much of him, so that he had room to let Robin go. Kuzan was also there at Ohara, and it gives us insight on how and where these two future admirals differ. You see, Kuzan was there to fulfill his mission too. Whether he wanted to or not, he was going to accomplish and fulfill what he was tasked to do. He is open and acknowledges different justices. Justice changes shape from one standpoint. That is why I won't criticize your idea of justice. This openly proves to us that Kuzan operates from a point of communitarianism. He acknowledges different points of views and considers others. He even saved Robin. But that's beside the point. Akainu chose absolute justice before Ohara. What he says goes. He doesn't care about others. A man who lives and abides by his own principles no matter how many people die during it. 22 years ago, the world government ordered a buster call on the island of Ohara in the West Blue. The scholars there had been illegally researching the Void Century and the poneglyphs. The Tree of Knowledge was burned. Almost every citizen of Ohara died. The only survivors were Nico Robin and Jaguar D. Saul. But there's a detail in that sequence that is easy to miss if you're watching for the action. The world government had prepared an evacuation ship for the non-scholar citizens of Ohara, the ordinary people, the ones who had nothing to do with archaeology or forbidden history. That ship was provided. It was there. The civilians boarded it, and then Sakazuki, then a vice admiral, ordered his men to fire on that ship. His logic, stated plainly in the text, if even one scholar had boarded that evacuation ship, if even one person carrying knowledge of the Void Century had slipped into the crowd of innocents, the entire mission would have been a failure. His words essentially are, however small the evil, we cannot allow it to thrive. This is the scene that reveals what absolute justice actually costs. It is not some abstract philosophical cost. It is specific. It is an evacuation ship full of civilians. It is the mathematical acceptability of innocent life, because the probability of threat outweighs the certainty of innocence. Kuzan called him a fool and an idiot for going too far. Kuzan later went back afterward and wept over Saul's frozen body. And then he broke ranks and let Robin run. Two men at the same atrocity. Two completely different things happening inside them. The question I'm staking here is, does Akainu feel anything about it? There is no evidence anywhere in the text that he has ever questioned it. None. There is no scene where he sits with the weight of it. There is no moment, not in the story, not in any SBS, not in any author commentary, where Sakazuki looks back at that evacuation ship and doubts. The most disturbing thing here is that the decision was correct in his framework, and correct decisions do not require grief. This is the specific horror of the man. He participated in a massacre and went home and slept soundly, operating from pure conviction. The conviction protected him from the arithmetic of what he had done. It still does. And now the story brings us to Marineford. Kizaru, Aokiji, and Akainu. We got to see the two other admirals here in full force. And the funny thing is, each of them contradict one another in a way. Hear me out. Marineford is where Akainu becomes everything the series has been building him toward. He arrives as something more dangerous. A strategist, a manipulator, a relentless pursuer, and the man who commits the series' single most emotionally devastating act. Let's start with the manipulation of Squard, because it is the part that tends to get lost in the noise of the war. Squard was one of Whitebeard's allied pirate captains. He had a personal history. His crew had been killed by Goldie Roger, and Akainu, working within Sengoku's overarching strategy, fed Squard false information to make him believe that Whitebeard had made a deal with the Marines, that he was sacrificing the allied crews to save Ace. Squard believed it. He stabbed Whitebeard through the chest. Akainu, the man of absolute justice, the man for whom truth is the only acceptable currency, used deliberate, sophisticated deception to fracture the enemy from within. He is willing to lie in service of what he calls truth. He is tactically sophisticated enough to identify a man's wound and apply pressure to exactly that point. This is not the behavior of someone who is merely extreme. This is the behavior of someone who understands people deeply enough to know exactly how to break them. And this leads us to Ace. Portgas D. Ace stood between Akainu and Luffy. The war was still active. Ace had, for a moment, an avenue of escape. And Akainu opened his mouth and insulted Whitebeard. Whitebeard is a loser from the bygone era. Your real father Gold Roger stood in his way, making him an eternal loser who could never become king. I mean, you get my point here. Akainu did this specifically and deliberately, knowing that Ace regarded Whitebeard as a father. Ace turned back. His identity wound, the shame he carried about being Roger's son, the desperate hunger to prove that Whitebeard was a better man than his father was the pressure point. Akainu had already identified it. The death of Ace was simply a character autopsy performed by someone who understood exactly who Ace was and what Ace could not resist. Akainu punched a fist of magma through Ace's back and torso. Ace died on Marineford, cradled in Luffy's arms as Luffy broke completely. And in the 20-some years of One Piece, that remains the only time a villain has truly, permanently destroyed Luffy's spirit. Akainu is physically written into the series' most important character forever. The X-shaped scar on Luffy's chest came from him. Literally shows us how he is permanently inscribed into our main character. But here is the moment that, for me, is the most revealing thing about Akainu at Marineford. After Ace was dead, after the battle was, functionally, over, After the strategic objective had been achieved, Akainu kept going. He pursued Luffy. He chased a half-dead boy across a battlefield that had already been decided. Is this fanaticism? Maybe, but I think it is something more specific than that. He had said himself, explicitly, that he wanted to end both bloodlines. Rogers, through Ace, Dragons through Luffy. And Luffy is, uniquely, both, part of a lineage that the world's most dangerous revolutionary comes from. To Akainu, leaving Luffy alive was not merely an oversight. It was an active failure of principle. The war being won was irrelevant to whether the principle had been satisfied. The only thing that stopped him was Shanks. Akainu was furious. And in that fury is the one moment in Marineford that might, if you squint hard enough, look like something personal. Akainu fought for 10 days on Punk Hazard to become Fleet Admiral. 10 days of combat between two men of roughly equal power. A battle so total it split the island in half, changed its climate permanently, leaving one side perpetually volcanic and the other perpetually frozen. When Sengoku retired after Marineford, the Marines needed a new Fleet Admiral. Two names were on the table, Sakazuki and Kuzan. These were not merely the two strongest candidates. They were two men who had come up through the ranks together, both promoted to Admiral alongside Borsalino, all three of them serving in parallel for years, knowing each other in the way only long institutional colleagues do. And now they were being asked to settle a philosophical dispute with their fists on a deserted island for 10 consecutive days. Punk Hazard was not chosen for any strategic reason. It was simply available. An uninhabited island in the New World. Far from civilians, far from the political machinery of Marineford. What it became, over those 10 days, was the physical record of what happens when two opposing principles are granted equal destructive force and told to resolve the argument. Two men had an argument about institutional philosophy, and the argument physically bisected an island and left it permanently uninhabitable. The terrain of Punk Hazard is the visual record of a debate. The frozen side is everything Kuzan stood for: restraint, ambiguity, the willingness to let the cold coexist with the warmth. The burning side is everything Akainu stood for: total, tectonic. He won. He became Fleet Admiral, and then one of his first decisions was to relocate Marine headquarters into the New World, in direct preparation for the new pirate age. As we all know, Akainu is a man who doesn't grant mercy. We see him attacking his own subordinates, even ready to kill Kobe before Shanks stopped him. The terms of the duel were a fight to decide which ideology would lead the Marines. A death match. In the tradition of settling an institutional dispute, Kuzan lost, and yet Kuzan walked away, alive. Akainu, for all his absolutism, could not bring himself to execute a man he had known for decades. A fellow admiral, a former colleague, someone who came up through the Marines alongside him. This would be the crack, the wound, the one moment where the principle wavers, the one person who got inside the armor. Post-time skip Akainu is largely confined to Marine headquarters, watching events he cannot directly intervene in, visibly and increasingly furious. The Fleet Admiral cannot be deployed like an admiral. He cannot personally appear at every crisis. He has to wait for outcomes. He has to read reports. He argued with Fujitora over the Denden Mushi, due to the fact that Fujitora let Luffy and Law go. You can see the frustration seething from his face, simply because he wouldn't have had let that happen if he were there. He was forced to watch Blackbeard and Law fight and wait for the result. He sent Kizaru to Egghead, the closest thing he has to a right hand, and Kizaru came back, barely, emotionally shattered, calling Akainu an ingrate and breaking down over having had to kill his best friend. The darkest irony in the entire arc of Akainu is that he's the man who clawed his way to the top, who fought 10 days straight for the right to shape the institution, is now trapped by the role he fought for. Sengoku was a strategist, a planner, a man who belonged behind a desk. Akainu is a frontline force of nature, a tectonic event in a marine uniform, and he is now required to be Sengoku. The man who believed most completely in the system is now the man most constrained by it. Instead of conquering the institution consumed him. But here is where I want to talk about the paradox, which is central in his character. Akainu serves the world government. He is formally loyal to it, but his version of absolute justice and the world government's actual agenda are not the same thing. The world government protects celestial dragon slaveholders, people Akainu has shown explicit contempt for. It allows CP0 to operate as the celestial dragon's puppets, something Akainu said to the Five Elders' faces during the argument over Doflamingo's falsified resignation report. He was outraged that they had acted behind his back. He was outraged that the false report damaged the Marines' credibility. And he was outraged, fundamentally, because the institution he represents was made to look like a tool of the powerful, rather than an arm of justice. But the Vegapunk broadcast kinda changed everything. In the Egghead arc, Vegapunk's posthumous message went out to the entire world, transmitted through every Denden Mushi. reaching pirates, marines, and civilians alike. The broadcast revealed the truth about the world government's history, the Void Century, the real nature of what the government has been protecting and suppressing for 800 years. This is the event that forces the question Akainu has been able to avoid for his entire life. What does absolute justice demand when the institution you've served is revealed to be foundationally criminal? Does he accept that information and act on it? Does absolute justice, applied consistently, now point away from the world government? Or does he protect the institution because the institution is order, and order, however corrupt, is still preferable to chaos? I don't know the answer to this question, and there are a lot of routes Oda can choose to take here. Genuinely indifferent men do not fight 10 days for a title they didn't originally seek. They do not pursue a dying boy across a battlefield that has already been won. They do not explode at the five elders for making the Marines look compromised. Akainu's intensity is the intensity of a man who cannot stop, because stopping means sitting with the arithmetic of his own life. If he slows down, if he allows even one moment of genuine reflection, the numbers start adding up. The conviction protects him from the arithmetic of his own life. Absolute justice is not a policy he follows. It is who he is. Strip it away and there is no Sakazuki. Only a man who destroyed a ship full of civilians, killed a young man for who his father was, and has spent his entire career in service of an institution that was built on exactly the kind of historical crime he claims to be fighting against. He cannot be that man, so he is never anything other than this one. There is also the sword question, which deserves a section of its own. I think it's worth mentioning here. Sword is the Marine Headquarters Covert Special Force, first revealed in Chapter 956. Members of Sword operate outside the official chain of command, meaning they are not subject to standard Marine orders. X-Drake was revealed as a Sword member. Kobe appears to be one as well. There are theories circulating that Akainu may be Sword's covert leader. The credible evidence here includes his sword tattoo, his consistently hostile relationship with the Five Elders, and just the structural elegance of the theory. His desk-bound fury post-time skip is not paralysis but cover. His clashes with the Gorosei are not insubordination, but the only man in the institution who is actually running a real operation that doesn't answer to them. To be honest, I personally don't resonate with this theory. In a way, this kind of ruins the conflict within his character. The loyal dog to the institution cannot be leading a special force within the institution itself. The theory still stands, but unconfirmed, and I hope it stays that way. Let me know what you guys think. The most important thing Oda did when designing Akainu was not giving him magma instead of fire. It is that he gave him magma and then made Ace the fire user, so that the confrontation between them was not random or arbitrary, but written into their powers. Magma is hotter than fire. Akainu's Magu-Magu no Mi does not merely neutralize Ace's, but it consumes it. Their battle is over before it begins, physically. His justice does not coexist with Ace's defiance. It evaporates it. But the deeper symbolism is geological. Fire is reactive. Fire burns what exists on the surface. It's immediate. Magma is something else. Magma is tectonic. It builds pressure underground, slowly, across geological timescales, and when it finally surfaces, it obliterates the terrain. It changes the shape of the earth itself. Look at Punk Hazard. One side volcanic, one side frozen. The island permanently reconfigured by a single battle between two men. That is what Akainu's justice does. It does not respond to events. It arrives from beneath. Inevitable, having been building long before anyone knew it was coming. The epithet, Akainu, Red Dog. In the Momotaro tradition, the three admirals are the pheasant, Aokiji, Blue Pheasant, the monkey Kizaru, Yellow Monkey, and the dog Akainu, Red Dog. The dog is loyalty, obedience, the animal that serves its master. But in Japanese folklore, the dog is also a guardian of thresholds, the creatures who stand at the boundary between the living world and what lies beyond. Akainu is loyal to the system, yes, but he is also the thing that stands at the gate between the world order and whatever truth is trying to cross through it. He is the threshold guardian for the world government's secrets. He keeps Robin from escaping. He keeps Luffy from surviving. He is stationed at the border between the world as it is and the world as it could be, and his entire existence is dedicated to ensuring that border holds. And then there is the blank past. Unlike virtually every other significant character in One Piece, Sakazuki's origin is almost entirely unknown. There is no revealed childhood trauma. There is no moment of formative wound. There is no backstory that explains why he became this. As a child, shown in brief glimpses, he already wore a cap with the kanji for justice on it. He has always been this. Oda gave him no origin to locate, as of yet. You cannot feel sympathy for what you cannot locate. You cannot extend the emotional off-ramp of, he became this way because, when there is no because on offer. Doflamingo gets a flashback. Crocodile gets implications. Even Blackbeard's 26 years are compressed into a feeling of terrible patience. Akainu has nothing, and whether he does or not is up to Oda. I personally feel like he does not need a tragic backstory to work as a great villain. He already has everything a good antagonist needs.
But here's the thing.
Every other major antagonist in One Piece allows the audience a form of resolution. You can hate Doflamingo and also understand him. Both things at once. You can hate what Crocodile does and also see the shape of the dream that broke him. Even Blackbeard, who is in many ways the most purely selfish villain in the cast, lets you understand his hunger. The audience is given the emotional tools to process them. Akainu offers no such tools. He cannot be fully hated because he is sincere. Whatever he does, he believes. He is not lying to himself. He is the only major character in One Piece who has never lied to himself. No delusion is incorporated into his character. He only does what he believes in. But at the same time, he can't be fully respected because his sincerity serves a structure built on slavery and suppressed history and the murder of scholars who were trying to tell the truth. He cannot be pitied because he shows no wound. He cannot be redeemed in the conventional sense because he has not, in his own framework, done anything wrong. You cannot redeem a man who does not believe he needs it. The result is a character the audience cannot resolve, and Oda knows it. The story uses that irresolution. You see, every character around Akainu evolves. Garp breaks down over Ace's death. Sengoku retires. Fujitora goes rogue adjacent, kinda. Kuzan leaves the Marines entirely and joins Blackbeard. Even Kizaru has his moment of fracture, his breakdown after Egghead. Everyone around him moves in a sense. Akainu does not move. He is a fixed point. He was the same man at Ohara 22 years ago as he is today. And the story's argument about whether that constancy is strength or catastrophe, whether it is the most admirable thing in the cast or the most dangerous, has not yet been answered. So, what does Akainu crystallize about One Piece's argument about justice? Justice is not a principle that protects itself. It requires the people who hold it to be worthy of it. And a person can be completely sincere in their commitment to justice, utterly free of hypocrisy, genuinely motivated by something real, and still be in service of evil, because the institution through which they act was built on evil from the beginning. Akainu is not a hypocrite. He is something worse. He is a genuinely just man, in some deep, narrow, rigorous sense of that word, who has given that justice entirely to a system that has no use for it. The world government does not want absolute justice. Instead, they want the facade of it. It needs someone like Akainu at the top of the Marines because he makes the machinery look legitimate. He is the human face of institutional credibility, and he has never understood that. He has never understood that the most important function he serves is not catching criminals. It is making the world believe that the people who run it are accountable to the same rules everyone else is. He is the only character in this cast whose arc has not resolved. Everyone else has either broken with the world government, made their peace, or found clarity about what they stand for. Akainu is still inside the machine, still the most powerful man in the institution. And the series' most structurally significant question is not whether Luffy can beat him. It is what Sakazuki does when the machine he has given his entire life to reveals its full corruption to his face. He doesn't know if he's the one who destroys it. He doesn't know if he's the one who holds it together. He only knows that however it ends, it will end on his terms. It will end in accordance with his principle, because nothing is more important than his principle.